Here are my top 5 potential outcomes for that men's Royal Rumble. Top 5 potential outcomes for the men's Royal Rumble. And these are these are the top 5 people who could win the match. And I would be happy, by the way, if any of these 5 come true in the context by which I'm presenting them to you. Okay, are you ready for this? Okay, here we go. I don't know. There are a couple of X factors to talk about, of course. But we'll talk about the X factors. Let me get into my top 5. Okay, number 1. My number 1 pick to win the men's Royal Rumble this year is Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston winning the men's Royal Rumble would come out of nowhere. Kofi Kingston had the best 8 months of 2019 that anybody could have possibly asked for. Starting in February, going all the way to October. February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. Yeah, 8 months or so. Starting in February, going to October, Kofi Kingston had it all, including a trip to WrestleMania, where he won the WWE Championship, including multiple successful WWE title defenses, including representing the company as its champion, and I think doing so well. Some people didn't like him as champion. I think those people are haters with a capital 8. I thought he did great. I thought he had the best post-WrestleMania season last year of anybody. Unfortunately, that season was dried up by the time October came around, and he stepped into the ring for 30 seconds with Brock Lesnar on the Fox premiere of SmackDown, and Brock Lesnar beat him with one move and took the title away from him. And Kofi Kingston hasn't been anywhere even remotely near the WWE Championship or any talk of it since, especially as we lead towards the Royal Rumble. Now he's even further from it. He's back to being in a tag team. He and Big E are the tag team champions of SmackDown. New Day is back to being a group where now no one of the individual is bigger than the faction, which wasn't the case when Kofi Kingston was the champion. Kofi Kingston was the standout, obviously. He was the WWE champion. Kofi Kingston has done interviews where he said, based on his performance on SmackDown, he doesn't think he's entitled to a rematch. He doesn't think he's entitled to argue the result. Clearly, he lost. And that's true. He clearly lost. However, why? There's been no explanation as to why he lost. If it was just one bad night, if he was caught once in a position where he wasn't prepared, that happens. Everybody has an off night. But if you expect us to believe that that is what happened with Kofi Kingston, then let me tell you, he deserves to have another night. And maybe he doesn't get it. I mean, the automatic rematch clause was thrown out the window. Doesn't exist in WWE anymore. So how else is he going to get it? Look, he has never come remotely close to having his revenge against Brock Lesnar. If Kofi Kingston, I believe that the WWE fan base is ready, willing, and able to accept Kofi Kingston back into the main event scene. However, it has to be done through a grand gesture. You know, in all those movies where you want to win the girl's heart, and so you got to jump up on the table in the cafeteria and sing her a song in front of everybody. That's a grand gesture. That's something that the whole world is going to be talking about. That's something undeniable. You can't sit there and go, man, how did he get that girl? Well, are you going to jump up on a cafeteria table and sing her a love song? I don't think so. That's what Kofi Kingston needs to do. Kofi Kingston is in the Royal Rumble match. He's not even being talked about as a possibility to win this thing. But if he won this thing, I don't think people would say, what? That doesn't make sense. They'd go, the old Kofi's back. I miss the old Kofi. And I think people do miss that Kofi. I think there's a bittersweetness with Kofi Kingston right now that when we look at him, regardless of how successful this tag team, the New Day, is, we know you were the champion and you lost in 30 seconds and your entire reign was forgotten about. Nobody talks about Kofi Kingston in that context anymore. And it was one of the number one moments of 2019. Kofi Kingston needs to get back there, and I think the only way to do it is to eliminate Brock Lesnar in the Royal Rumble match and win the match. Go on to WrestleMania and have your rematch at WrestleMania. Kofi, Brock, the sequel. I was going to say Kofi, Brock 2, but people don't want to remember that Kofi Kingston fought Brock Lesnar on one of those WWE Network specials. And that match was actually a little longer than the SmackDown title match, believe it or not. So I think this would be the third match between Brock and Kofi, but we'll call it the sequel. Certainly, it's only the second WWE Championship match between Brock and Kofi. That match needs to happen at WrestleMania. And the story that needs to be told between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania is that Kofi Kingston learned. Kofi Kingston knows what he did wrong. Kofi Kingston is finally ready to win. There's no pancakes at WrestleMania. I'm not coming out of a box of cereal this year. I'm not doing a skit in the ring where I dance around and all the legends drop their finishing moves on me. Hell, WrestleMania 29, Kofi Kingston, he was doing the primetime Sam Roberts, the last professional broadcaster job. He was sitting up there in the bleachers hosting the kickoff show. None of that anymore. When Kofi Kingston won the WWE Championship, it was not a fluke. It was not a moment. It was a new precedent for where Kofi Kingston is at in his career. And at the Royal Rumble, he reminds everybody, okay? So that's my pick number one. Kofi Kingston wins, eliminates Brock Lesnar, goes on to WrestleMania to face Brock Lesnar. Pick number two in my top 5 men's Royal Rumble winners is controversial, but bear with me on this. Follow me, Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is my number 2 seed to win the Royal Rumble this year. Follow me on this, okay? Roman Reigns does not eliminate Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is already eliminated by the time Roman Reigns comes in because the Roman Reigns story is not about Brock Lesnar. I'm not interested in going to WrestleMania and doing Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, so don't think that. In this scenario, the men's Royal Rumble match is the match that starts the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. It's the first match of the night. That's not insane. There's 2 Royal Rumble matches. There's all kinds of title matches. The card is loaded. I mean, you've got Andrade versus Humberto for the United States Championship. You got Bayley versus Lacey Evans, Women's Championship. Shorty G and Sheamus. You got the Falls Count Anywhere match between Roman and King Corbin. You got Becky versus Asuka. What if you start with the men's Royal Rumble match? And I know you're going to sit there and you go, but you got Roman Reigns and King Corbin in a Falls Count Anywhere match later in the night. Yeah, Roman's still going to win that match. It's not a big deal. The reason you start with it is because when Roman Reigns wins, you have a bunch of fans going, you got to be kidding me. So now Roman, if he's either going to face Brock Lesnar or we're going to have to watch The Fiend lose to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, you have got to be kidding me. I am kidding you. That's not at all what's going to happen. Because the reason we did it first was to not spoil what was going to happen as we move later in the evening to the Fiend Daniel Bryan Universal Championship strap match. And the 4 corner posts are first touched by Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan wins the Universal Championship from The Fiend. Now, the strap match is a very unique match in the sense that you can win that match without actually long-term damaging your opponent. Daniel Bryan can win the Universal Championship without making The Fiend seem any weaker. He doesn't have to pin The Fiend. He doesn't have to tap The Fiend. He doesn't have to be, have The Fiend down for a 10 count in a last man standing scenario. All he has to do is hit those, theoretically, if they're doing it by regular strap match rules, is hit the 4 corner posts while he's strapped to The Fiend. You can do that and still have The Fiend look just as fearsome as always. Daniel Bryan wins the Universal Championship at the Royal Rumble. And when he wins the championship, we realize maybe even Roman comes out. Because what will happen is Roman will win the Royal Rumble and Baron Corbin will jump him immediately after. And we'll start the Falls Count Anywhere match immediately after the Royal Rumble. Roman will still slug it out. He'll pull it out. The whole first hour and a half of the show is dedicated to Roman. Daniel Bryan wins the Universal Championship. And we realize that this year at WrestleMania, it's the match that we've all wanted forever. It's the match that defined the middle of the last decade. It's Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan. And you don't have to turn either one heel. It'll happen naturally. That's, I believe, the most compelling match for either of them, quite frankly. If Roman Reigns wins the Royal Rumble in the first match of the night, give it a beat. Give it a second. Because in my scenario, Daniel Bryan is winning the title. And then we've got Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns going to WrestleMania one-on-one. And whoever wins that match in 2020, whoever wins that match, you're going to have a barn burner of a show. I think those two guys are going to bring out the best in each other. I think those two guys are going to tell the best story getting to WrestleMania. And, you know, as much as we all want to see Daniel Bryan win, I think he'll end up putting out a performance so good that win or lose, he'll be elevated to the moon. And Roman Reigns will be that confirmed main eventer. I mean, I think Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns is almost like Hogan Warrior in a sense. I mean, that wasn't the greatest match in the world, but I think that was a meeting of two icons. And I think that's kind of what you're looking at with Roman Reigns versus Daniel Bryan. That's why Roman Reigns is my number 2 pick. My number 3 pick is Keith Lee. There are 5 spots, and this isn't the CM Punk pick. It's very, very different. That's why the scenario is so important. There are 5 spots in the Men's Royal Rumble match that are unclaimed. 25 names have been added to the match. 5 spots are unclaimed. My number 3 pick is Keith Lee. I'm backstage this week. CM Punk's pick was Keith Lee. And he said that Keith Lee had such a showing at Survivor Series that he wanted to see Keith Lee get pushed to the moon, get into the Royal Rumble match, eliminate Brock, go on to WrestleMania, and beat Brock Lesnar and become the WWE champion. I disagree 100%, and here is why. If Keith Lee won the Royal Rumble, eliminated Brock Lesnar, and then went on to WrestleMania and said, I want you, Brock, me and you, WrestleMania, let's go, you would elevate Keith Lee to the moon. CM Punk is right. But in the process, you would damage NXT and everyone in NXT. Now, personally, I think that one of the reasons Keith Lee won the North American Championship on NXT this week might have been to kind of let you know he's not going to be in the Royal Rumble. This thought process I went through was before he won the North American Championship. However, this whole thing still works with him as North American Champion, and he can lose the title on the way to WrestleMania. Because Keith Lee wins the Royal Rumble, he doesn't just elevate himself, he elevates the entire NXT brand. Keith Lee, my number 3 pick, wins the Royal Rumble. And then he announces, I get a championship match at WrestleMania. Brock, I don't want you. Maybe he says that one week. It's not going to be Brock Lesnar. I already eliminated Brock Lesnar. I don't need to prove myself to Brock Lesnar. And then the Fiend starts licking his chops. All right, Keith Lee, you're all mine, baby. WrestleMania, I am going to tear you up. Yeah, but that's the thing. I'm not interested in the Universal Championship. I'm not interested in the Fiend. I'll fight the Fiend. I'll fight Brock Lesnar, but I don't want either of those 2 titles because Keith Lee wins the Royal Rumble and he decides he wants to go to WrestleMania for the NXT Championship, that the North American title is not enough for him. He wants to go to WrestleMania and he wants to take on the NXT champion, probably Adam Cole. And what you're left with is a scenario where the Saturday before WrestleMania, you still have TakeOver. But on Sunday, the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania, Keith Lee, Adam Cole, NXT Championship, main event level WrestleMania match. That is how you get people to tune into NXT. The scenario of Keith Lee winning and going on to face Brock Lesnar would be great if NXT were a developmental territory that is aired on the WWE network. But NXT is the WWE's 3rd brand. And I only say it's the 3rd brand because it's the newest. In chronological order, NXT is WWE's 3rd brand. But NXT is on national cable television, USA, every week in prime time for 2 hours. NXT is a viable revenue stream. It's making money for WWE. Everywhere you go, NXT is the third brand. NXT is not developmental anymore. There's no more call up. There's call over. There's this. There's that. Okay, if NXT is the third brand, then why, when given the opportunity, is everybody's first move to leave? Why, when given the opportunity, would Keith Lee decide, well, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm going to the real shows? It can't happen. You need to get people watching NXT. There are far less people watching NXT than are watching Raw and SmackDown. The answer to that could be make some stars on NXT. Have people on NXT that are stars. How do you get stars on NXT? It doesn't mean have Seth Rollins show up to NXT every week. It doesn't mean have Becky Lynch show up to NXT every week. It doesn't mean have Roman Reigns do a pop-in. It means go to a pay-per-view like the Royal Rumble. Make Keith Lee look like $1 million. Make Keith Lee look like a superstar. And let the world know that if you want to see more of this guy, it's Wednesday nights. Because I don't want NXT to become a full-fledged, just third brand. I want NXT to remain separate. I don't want to see tri-branded pay-per-views. You know, we take for granted that Raw and SmackDown are just, on these dual-branded pay-per-views. If NXT were a true equal with Raw and SmackDown, and everything is the same, and these pay-per-views become tri-branded, you know what we're sacrificing? TakeOver. And I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. Everybody that ever said, I don't want Vince to get his hands on NXT, I want Triple H to maintain control of it, had better not want NXT to become equivalent to Raw and SmackDown. It needs to be just as big, just as good, but separate. NXT needs to be a separatist organization. And in order to do that properly, the superstars of NXT have to have pride in NXT. And we can't say, well, let's elevate Keith Lee by putting him in contention for the WWE Championship. What you have to say is, let's elevate the NXT Championship so that when Keith Lee is in contention for it, it makes him even bigger. My third pick is Keith Lee winning the Royal Rumble and not going for the WWE or the Universal Championship, but instead going for the NXT Championship and going for that match at WrestleMania. Number 4, and again, stay with me on this, Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is my number 4 pick. Maybe it wasn't a prediction. Maybe it was a spoiler. Brock Lesnar is my number 4 pick, and I know what you're saying already. Has nothing to do with Cain Velasquez, has nothing to do with Tyson Fury, has nothing to do with any of those people. The reason Brock Lesnar is my number 4 pick is because when Brock Lesnar wins, he's the WWE champion. So what's he going to do? I'll tell you what he's going to do. He said, I won the Royal Rumble. I get a championship match. Yeah, that's true. Who do you want it to be against then? The Fiend. I want to be the WWE champion and the Universal champion. If The Fiend beats Daniel Bryan at the Royal Rumble, I think we're pretty well cemented that The Fiend is unbeatable. If Brock Lesnar walks into the Royal Rumble after saying nobody in the locker room can beat him, and he walks in at number 1, and he goes through 29 other men and leaves the Royal Rumble as the winner, then I think it's pretty cemented that Brock Lesnar is unbeatable. But if you got Brock Lesnar who's unbeatable, and you got The Fiend who's unbeatable, one of them has to get beaten. So we put the Beast and the Monster, the Beast and the Fiend, together, one-on-one, title versus title, winner take all at WrestleMania. People talk about The Fiend versus Roman Reigns. People talk about The Fiend versus this, The Fiend versus that. The biggest match The Fiend could ever have is The Fiend versus Brock Lesnar. And to me, it's the way to go for The Fiend. I think if The Fiend were to lose to Brock Lesnar, it would be okay for The Fiend. I think if The Fiend were to beat Brock Lesnar, it would make him. But when you walk into WrestleMania, when you walk into that stadium, when you turn on the WWE Network, and they tell you it's The Fiend versus Brock Lesnar, you can't tell me you know who's going to win that match. I mean, we're going back to now Brock Lesnar versus Undertaker WrestleMania 30 territory, where you thought you knew who was going to win that match, but now you don't. Because that happened, this can happen. You walk into that match and you do not know who's going to win. And you do not know how they're going to win. Because both guys are unbeatable. Brock Lesnar wins the Royal Rumble, but instead of going after a celebrity or a legend or Roman Reigns or anybody else, since he's already the champion, he wins a championship match. And he picks the Universal Champion, The Fiend. That's my number 4 pick, with Brock Lesnar winning the match. My number 5 pick is a dark horse. My number 5 pick is a pick that I'm making to allow the Royal Rumble to make a new single star. Let's say Kofi Kingston comes out, he does a couple things, he gets eliminated. There's another New Day member. What if Big E were to come out, eliminate Brock Lesnar, and win the Royal Rumble? What if Big E were the one that went to WrestleMania to challenge Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship? What if Big E hunted for vengeance against the man who took away the dreams of his best friend? What if we take a serious look at what Big E versus Brock Lesnar actually looks like? People have been saying it forever. People have been wanting Big E to have a run, whether it's as a good guy, whether it's as a bad guy. Here's your opportunity. Big E eliminates Brock Lesnar, wins the Royal Rumble, wants his match with Brock Lesnar. Can you imagine? WrestleMania 35, Kofi Kingston wins the title. WrestleMania 36, Big E wins the title. Can you imagine the pressure Big E would be under walking into WrestleMania in a WWE Championship match? Last year, your New Day brother, Kofi Kingston, won the WWE Championship. He beat Daniel Bryan. This year, you're the one with the same opportunity, except now you have to beat Brock Lesnar. The pressure's on. Because Kofi Kingston has proven that it's possible. If it's possible, Big E, show me that you can do it. And this is the moment that we see if Big E can become that singles breakout star. That's my number 5 pick, Big E, to win the 2020 Royal Rumble. Of course, there's lots of things to talk about with the 5 open spots. Cain Velasquez's name has been thrown around. Obviously, that's going to have something to do with Brock Lesnar, right? Tyson Fury's name has been tossed around. Who knows who that's going to have anything to do with? But let's talk about, some of the legends. Let's talk about The Undertaker. The Undertaker is always a possibility to be in the Royal Rumble. Maybe The Undertaker will be there. 2 names that have come up in some conversations, and I was talking about them with Wade Keller this week, are The Rock and John Cena. Both those names have come up as potential entrants in the Royal Rumble. I think they'd be huge. I think if either one of them won, walking into WrestleMania with Brock Lesnar versus The Rock, even John Cena, I would hope it's John Cena versus Brock instead of John Cena versus The Fiend. But either way, if John Cena or The Rock came out for the Royal Rumble, Minute Maid Park would turn upside down. It would be the damnedest thing you ever saw in your life. But how about this? The Undertaker. If John Cena or The Rock come out, I think you want it to lead to a title match with Brock Lesnar. But what about The Undertaker? Do we want another Undertaker-Brock Lesnar match? I would say no. So what do we do? Well, here's what I think. There's 2 scenarios. I was talking about it on Busted Open this week. People wanting a Sting Undertaker match at WrestleMania. I don't. There's one scenario where the build to The Undertaker versus Sting would be cool. And that's The Undertaker comes out enters the Royal Rumble, eliminates Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar looks up at The Undertaker. The Undertaker looks at Brock Lesnar. Cain Velasquez comes out, starts beating up Brock Lesnar. And there in the entryway, looking at The Undertaker, is Sting. Maybe Sting even enters the Royal Rumble and eliminates Undertaker. Something like that. I love the idea of The Undertaker eliminating Brock Lesnar. We think that's going to lead to a Brock Lesnar-Undertaker fight. But Cain Velasquez makes his presence known. As Undertaker stands alone in the ring, Caw! There's Sting staring back at him. You wouldn't get goosebumps? I would get goosebumps for that. But I told you, I don't particularly want to see The Undertaker versus Sting at WrestleMania. I would love to see that maybe at an international pay-per-view, but not at WrestleMania. There's one name that did not make my top 5. That name is Drew McIntyre. And here's why. Because how great would it be if The Undertaker came out, he eliminated Brock Lesnar, and the camera is just a close-up. It's a close-up of The Undertaker. And Brock's looking up at him, and Undertaker's looking down at him, and then from the side, boom! Here comes Drew McIntyre's foot in The Undertaker's face. Drew McIntyre eliminates The Undertaker quickly. The Undertaker comes out. He eliminates Brock Lesnar. Before the next participant even enters the match, Drew McIntyre eliminates The Undertaker. Let's go, buddy. Let's go. Now you're talking. Now you've got a Drew McIntyre-Undertaker match ready to go for WrestleMania. That's the match that I want to see for both those guys at WrestleMania. And Drew McIntyre doesn't have to win the Royal Rumble after that. There's 100 things that could happen. The Undertaker could pull the Hulk Hogan and drag Drew McIntyre to the outside. Kofi Kingston could do a trick. Roman Reigns could eliminate Drew McIntyre. If he wants to go on to face Daniel Bryan, Keith Lee could eliminate Drew McIntyre. Once Drew McIntyre has eliminated The Undertaker, the work has been done. And we do that right around number 20, 2/3 into the match. That way you got plenty of time to eliminate Drew McIntyre, and it has nothing to do with the story that we've told. The story that we've told still stands. Just some ideas I have for the men's Royal Rumble.